Every programming language must have variables. You have heard variables in mathematics. Now, variables are like containers. They hold data. They hold numbers. Why it is called variable in mathematics? Because the value inside is not fixed, not constant. It is changeable. So this is why it is called variable in mathematics. So if you look at the variable in mathematics, it is like a box, and you put the value of the variable inside the box container. So when you say x equal to 3, so what does that mean? It means the box of x, inside it, it has a 3. This is how we can imagine about a variable in mathematics. In computers, we have also variables that they work the same. So we can look at a variable as a box. It holds data. We use them to store data such as numbers and letters. So they are, since variables, they hold data, يحتفظون بالدata, then they are places in the memory, مواقع في الميموري. Some variables, they need 1 byte. Some variables, they need 2 bytes. Some variables, they need 100 bytes. Some variables need 4 kilobyte, like MP3 file, and etc. The data you store inside a variable is called a value, and you already know this from mathematics. When you say x equal to 3, so 3 is the value. This value can be changed. This is why it's called a variable. Every variable that you want to use in your program must be defined, declared. When we say declare, it means show what is the variable that you are using. So if you are adding, for example, if you have sum equal first plus second, here you have 3 variables. Now you are using these variables in this equation. Before this line, you have to define them. You have to tell Java compiler what is first, what is second, and what is sum. To answer this question for the definition, you need to tell the Java compiler the type and name and value of the variable. In computers, we have so many types, not only real and integer. So let's go over these 3 one by one. We will go for type, for name and value, and see what we can tell Java if we want to define a variable for its type, name, and value. This table shows the variables. Here is the type, and here is the rule for name, and here are some values, okay, some examples. Let's go for type. These are the data types initially that you need to study for Java. ابتداءً هاي الأنواع من الداتا types اللي لازم تتعلمهم for Java. We have a set of numbers, these 4 numbers, and these 4 letters and symbols. And this is for a special data type. It's called Boolean for chapter number 3. So these are keywords to Java. So you have to memorize them. And when I say memorize them, it doesn't mean like you similar to you memorize a definition. مو مثل تحفظ تعريف. You will memorize them by practice. So when you use them in your program, by the time you will remember them. And don't forget that Java is case sensitive, not only cares about spelling, it cares about case also. Small letter, capital letter. All of these data types are in small letters. I will show you the difference between each of them in the next slide. Now let's go for the name. Now for the name, there is a rule that we have to follow for naming our variables. يعني لما تبي تعطي اسم إلى الفاريبل في rule. Not every name you can name your variable. First, it should consist of letters. لازم يتكون من حروف فقط, which means small letters and capital letters, digits, أرقام 0 to 9, and underscore. That's it. You cannot use a plus. You cannot use a space. Very important to remember, you cannot use a space in the name. You cannot use dollar sign, you cannot use minus, and etc. The second condition, digits is allowed. مسموح تستعمل أرقام في الاسم, but you are not allowed to begin with a number. Last, the name should not be a reserved word, because these words, what does it mean by reserved word? It means كلمة محجوزة. Okay, it's already reserved or it is already fixed for Java. So you cannot give, for example, you cannot have a variable, the name is Boolean, because Boolean is a reserved word for Java. You cannot have a label called the class, because the class we use it for the program, and etc. Some examples for valid names, يعني names مقبولة, pay rate, first, letter 1. And some of invalid names will be 1 month, salary plus E. Why this is invalid? Because it begins with 1. Why this is not valid? Because it has a plus. And why this is not valid? Because it has dollar sign. And why this is not valid? Because it has a space between them. Before I go to the next step, for labeling variables, حتى تعطي اسم إلى الفاريبل. Okay, 2 observations, ملاحظتين. الملاحظة الأولى, the first observation or the first remark, don't give names to your variables by using single letters, A, B, C, and D. And let me take you to a Microsoft Word where I can type something while talking. Now, if you have a variable, for example, let's say I have an equation, A is equal to, small letter A, is equal to B multiplied by H. Here we have 3 variables. Here we have 3 variables, A, B, and H. If I tell you what is A, and what is B, and what is H, you will not be able to answer. Why? Because you are given labels to variables that you are using to solve certain problem, but their names does not indicate their functionality. ما يوضح شنو وظيفتهم, هدفهم هاي variables. But if I write an equation like the following, A stands for area, B stands for base, and H star stands for height, for example. So now when you read the equation, you will say, yeah, this equation, this is for area, this variable is for finding the area, and this variable is for the base of a rectangle, and this is the height of a rectangle. So which one is easy to read as an equation, this equation or this equation? So definitely this equation. Why? Because you put labels for each variable to indicate their functionality. يوضح شنو وظيفة كل variable by their name. This is one observation, ملاحظة. The second remark, if you have a variable that its name consists of more than 1 word. For example, I have a variable name. The name is salary for last month. See how large it is. First of all, it looks like all letters are in the same level. And if you want to read what is this, so you need to look for it. Where is the end and begin for each word? So this variable consists of 4 words. So how to make others read it easily? You have 2 choices. Either you use underscore between each word like this, and now it is easy to read it because underscore is allowed. So now it's easy to read it. You can say salary for last month, but don't leave spaces. And I found that this is a common mistake done by many students because the spaces are not allowed. What is the other technique that they use if you have a label with more than 1 word other than underscore? They say, okay, for the first word, leave it all small letter. But for the second word, capitalize the initial of this word and make it F, the small letter, for the first letter. And for the second word, also make it capital letter. And for the last one, you make it capital letter. Now it is easy to read the word for this label, so salary for last month. And this one is called camel case. And you know how the back of the camel looks like? It looks like sine wave, so it goes up and down. So this is why they are given this style as a camel case. And this is what we will do for our naming of our variables. Now for some values, because remember that for every variable we need type, name, and value. Now for some values, these are integers, 3 minus 7, 0, 5. And the keywords we use for Java is this. Here we have real numbers, 1.3 minus 4.5. And here we have char. Char, it means single character. And you use single quotation around it. And when we say string, it means a collection of letters. يعني كلمات, okay? Sentences or words and etc. And finally, Boolean, and this will be covered in chapter number 3. The values is either true or false. This is a picture of showing you the organization of the data types. It consists of 3 types: numbers, characters, and Boolean. Again, I will postpone the discussion for Boolean for chapter number 3. For characters, what are characters? For a letter, we know that the alphabetical letters, but $sign is not called a letter. مو بحرف $sign, it's a symbol, رمز. When we combine letters with symbols, لما ندمج letters مع symbols, we give them one label, one name called characters. So when we say characters, then either letters or symbols. So for numbers, they are divided into real numbers and integers. And you have learned this in mathematics, that reals, they have a fraction, أعداد حقيقية, and integers do not have a fraction, whole numbers, أعداد صحيحة. And for characters, either we have single character, and we use single quote. And you know what's the meaning of single quote? It means this is the apostrophe we have around the letter or the symbol. Or we have multiple characters and we surround it by double quotations. See here we have double quotation. So inside you can write anything between this quotation as a message. Now for Java, how to represent each of these? For Java, for real numbers, we have 2 choices, float and double. So if you have a variable and this variable is a number, and you decided that it should be real number, then what is the type you should choose? For Java, choose a float and double, or double. For integers, you have 4 choices: byte, short, integer, and long. For characters, for single you choose char, for multiple you choose a string, and for Boolean we write Boolean. Let us go in detail about the keywords in Java for these data types, because I'm sure some of you have a question in mind. What's the difference between a float and double? Both are real numbers. What is the difference between these 4 integer data types, although all of them for integers, and etc. So let's go and make this clarification. Data types can be also classified into 2 types. In the previous categorization, here we classified them based on their values. صنفنا الداتا types بناء على القيم that we are going to save them. But here we are classifying them based on how they are represented in the system. They are classified into 2 types, primitive or class type. When we say primitive, it means it is part of the Java system or part of the Java language. So it looks like, something is coming with Java. But when we say class type, it means this is a new data type, not part of Java, but someone has done it, which is called user defined. And sometimes you need a data type that does not belong to any of these, your own data type. Then you have to define it. لما تعرف data type for yourself, then it's called class type. And among all of these, the only one that is a class type is a string. And it starts with capital letter, see? S capital letter. All of these are small letters. I found that some students, they make a mistake. And instead of writing double D small letter, they write D capital letter. And it works. If you use it in your Java program, it will work. But the difference is that you are not using the primitive type. You are not using the one that is provided by Java. You are providing a class based of this data type, which consists of advanced features that you need to know in chapter number 5. So now, if you want to know the difference, is that all of them in small letters will be primitive. Anyone with the first letter, capital letter, it will be class type. Let's go for integer. We have 4 types. We have byte, we have short, we have integer, and we have long. The difference between any of these is size. الفرق بينهم بين كل واحد منهم المساحة اللي ياخذها في الميموري. So how much memory, how much size it takes in the memory. If you define a variable of 1 byte, then if you define a variable as a byte, it takes only 1 byte in the memory. But this will make you to save only this range of values. And if you make the number small, then you cannot save large numbers. If you define it short, then it will take 2 bytes in the memory and see the range is larger. So you can save more larger numbers into this variable. And if you define it as int, it takes 4 bytes and see the range is getting larger and larger. And if you define it as long, it takes even larger range of numbers. Your choice is critical. Your choice of data types is critical. You have to be careful on choosing data types. If you choose data type with large number of bytes, then your program will be large. And remember that for programs, the efficiency of their programs is by their speed and by their size. And when you download an application, you look at its speed, whether this application is fast or not, and also you look at its size. So how much memory, how many bytes this software needs to download. So we need speed and the space. Suppose you have 1,000 integer variables. If you define these variables as byte, then your program size will be 1,000 byte. But if you define them as short, then your program size will be 2,000 bytes. And if you define them as long, it will be 8,000 bytes. So the choice of your data type will affect the size of the program. Next, for a float, also the difference is in size. And now for single character, it needs 2 bytes, and for Boolean, it needs 1 byte. And for a string, depends on how many characters, since each character is 2 bytes. So if you have a string, let's say of size 4 letters, then 4 multiplied by 2, then it will take 8 bytes in the memory. For our problems that we are going to cover, whenever we tell you to write a program to read an integer, for example. So the question says, write a program that reads 2 integers. So here we are saying integers. So which one you should pick for the integer? You don't know the size yet. I'm saying just 2 integers. So which one to pick? By default, it will be int. Okay? When we say write a program to read 2 short integers, then you should choose short. So by default, integer is for int. This is similarly for float and double. When we say write a program that reads a real number, so by default, you pick double. Don't pick a float, pick double. When you write a constant in Java, يعني for example, when you write 127 as a constant in an equation, يعني في معادلة حطيت constant مضروب في variable. This constant, if it is 127, how the compiler will deal with it? شلون راح يتعامل مع الكومبايلر؟ هل بيعتبره byte or short or integer or long? Is it going to consider it as byte, short, integer, or long? It will consider it as int. And for real numbers, it will choose double for this variable. A constant is a value that you cannot change, which are the values. And here are some constants that are commonly used for data types. You already know about integers. You already know about the float, double, char, Boolean, but look at the float. see the values for a float. When you write the constant 1.2, then the compiler will assume that this 1.2 is double. But if you want to tell the compiler that 1.2, I don't want you to define it as double. Maybe you want to reduce the size of your program. Then you have to append it with F. So now the compiler will assume that it is double, and it will allocate 4 bytes for it. It will not allocate 8 bytes. It will allocate 4 bytes for it. For single characters, single quote. For string, double quotations. Next is the data declaration. This is now the rule in Java. If you want to define a variable, you have to give it a name, you have to give it a type, and you must save a value inside it. This is the syntax. So again, what is the meaning of a syntax? The grammar or the rules of the language. So what is the rule? If I want to define a variable, I want to tell Java compiler, hey, I want to define a variable. This is the name, this is the data type, and this is the value. This is the rule in the box. Whatever you see between square brackets, it means optional. This is how the syntax of any programming language is defined. Anything you write between square brackets is optional. So how to define a variable? First, you put the data type. So what shall I put in a place of type? You can put byte, you can put short, you can put int, you can put long, you can put float, you can put double, you can put char, and you can put boolean, and you can put a string, S capital letter, in a place of type. And how you decide which one depends on the problem. So if you want to add 2 numbers, so you need to choose data types for numbers, either integer or real. Next, you put the name of the variable. And in this declaration, you can define more than one variable at once. تقدر تعرف أكثر من variable في سطر واحد, because they share the same data type. So this is our first variable, variable 1, which is the name of the first variable. If you know at the time of your declaration the value, put the value, and it's optional. But later you have to put a value. If later you don't put a value, the compiler will tell you that you are defining a variable, but you never put a data inside it. If you want to define another variable, you put comma, and you do the same. Put the name. If you know the value, you put equal, and you put the value. At the end, if you define all the variables, you put semicolon. In the syntax above, what is inside the square brackets is optional. اختيار هنا مخير if you know the value, because sometimes this value we need to take it from the user and we don't know the value at the time of writing the program. So we define it and then we ask the user to give us the value, we put the value. Here are some examples. The first example, the data type is int, and in this statement we have 3 variables. The first one is called the style number. The second one is called number of checks. And the third one is called number of deposits. Now, style number does not have a value yet, but we need to put a value later. The second variable, it has the value 5. And the third variable has the value 0. Next is double, which is real number. The name is amount. The second one is interest rate. And both of them, we don't know their values yet, but we are defining them. We are declaring these variables. Finally, we have a variable of type char, single letter. The name of this variable answer, and we are saving the letter Y inside this variable.